Good afternoon, good morning, good evening, wherever you're joining from. We know colleagues have been dropping messages to us in the chat box and in the event chat box saying that they're joining from different locations around the world. So welcome to our session on how to drive country programming with knowledge work in ADB. And this is actually was supposed to be an internal session, but we decided that it is worth sharing with the public to just know how ADB is actually programming its knowledge work in the country level. And we have testimonials and we have got colleagues who will be speaking about it from the field who have done this themselves. My name is Vivek Raman and I'll be your moderator for this session. And I'm one of the organizers for the forum. Thank you very much for your active participation in these sessions for the past 3 days. It has been actually overwhelming to see the kind of response we have gotten to our agenda, as well as to some of the topics that have been raised. When we first started on day one with Maya Shankar, she talked a little bit about nudging people's behavior, especially on knowledge, and how do you get people to accept that. Then Mariana Mazzucato, on the end of day one, spoke a little bit about innovation and how innovation has to be done at the country level, at the government level, but also in organizations such as ours. We had so many departments who have also been sharing their expertise and their best practices, good practices on knowledge work, and to try to showcase that to the audience over here who's been joining us. And then yesterday, our leaders panel spoke a little bit about what is knowledge going to look like post the pandemic? What do we need to do better? And what do we need to reflect on to move on from there? To this morning, I don't know if you had a chance to join it. This is such a good segue from there that we had auditors talking about how do you measure knowledge work? What is the value of measuring knowledge work and how can we do that? In today's session, we're going to be talking exactly that. It's actually a progress report of sorts, and we will be discussing how do we program our knowledge work to make sure that we get the result and the impact that we want. With that, I would like to now just give you a few announcements. Please use our chat box actively. We'll be dropping any comments that you have. I'll be monitoring that and I'll make sure that you are either brought up on stage to ask a question in person or I will ask it to our panelists. We have a great lineup of speakers here and we want to make sure that this session is as interactive as possible, and they've been warned that they have to be provocative, they have to ask questions and share and really reflect on stories from how and when they did this work. And then, of course, please, if you're using social media, do use the hashtag ADB Knowledge Forum, and we'll be happy to feature you on our page as well. Let's talk a little bit about this session now. This has been the work of ADB for over 2 years, and we have really been so proud because this is something that kind of reflects that ADB took its knowledge programming work seriously and wanted to make an effort in how do we change that. So if you've ever wondered how at the country level does ADB really program its knowledge support for our developing member countries and for our government, you've come to the right spot. Let's think about the government's request for knowledge as pieces of confetti that are thrown in the air. And we in turn have to grab a couple of fistful. While what we will have grabbed will definitely have some impact, but we're not really sure, was that really the most strategic thing to do? Did we make sure that we are responding to the most necessary government need? This session, we are talking about how ADB has programmed that and has kind of reformed that process of doing it. We still have a long way to go, but there's definitely some learnings here for us to reflect on and change. But like I said, our team has been working on this for over 2 years now, and we had some wonderful colleagues from ADB who joined us and said, yes, let's try and pilot this with you. So we had 13 countries who piloted that with us. Few of them are here to speak to you about that. But rather than me telling you how great our work is, we actually have invited someone from the government of Indonesia and the Ministry of Finance, Pak Chandra Kusuma, to just come up on stage now and talk a little bit about the government's perspective about knowledge work, rather than us telling you how great this has been. Chandra, thank you so much for filling in. I know Ms. Dian Listari had an important meeting to go to this morning. The floor is yours.
Thank you so much, Vivek Rahman, and all the participants. Good morning, good afternoon and good evening for those attending the sessions from the regions and also other parts of the world. Firstly, let me convey an apology from our director, Ms. Dian Lestari, that she is unable to virtually be here with us all due to unexpected important agenda, but I will be representing her in delivering some context within the Indonesian governments today. But allow me also to thank the ADB and the organizing team for inviting me to speak in these very strategic sessions, I think, and hopefully providing a reasonable context for the discussions on the country knowledge programming in particular, as well as the overall ADB's knowledge management concept. I think that the integrations of the enhanced CKP process within the country partnership strategy, or the CPS, including in the Indonesia, will effectively support the delivery of the CPS. And to that extent, I also wish to convey our gratitude for continued engagements and support of the ADB to the Indonesia, particularly during these unprecedented conditions. It also will be interesting to hear in the session that the progress and dynamic of this CKP process thus far, as well as further initiatives to better enhance the CKP. Ladies and gentlemen, participants of the session, the CPS Indonesia ADB have set out that ADB's knowledge support will involve developing knowledge under each strategic pathway under the CPS, both as a standalone knowledge products and as elements incorporated into project and government plans. Well, following the One ADB approach, I understand that the CKP will promote cross-fertilizations of knowledge between sovereigns and non-sovereign operations and across sectors and teams. And an interdepartmental Indonesia Knowledge Advisory Group, or KAG, which also includes the ADB Institute inside it, coordinate the country knowledge works. And the country directors of the ADB's Indonesia resident missions is the knowledge custodian. Now, further, in full alignment with our National Medium-Term Development Plan, the CPS also identified knowledge needs in the 4 focus areas. First, the knowledge needs for improving the well-being. Second, the knowledge needs for accelerating the economic recovery. And thirdly, the knowledge needs for strengthening resilience. And lastly, the cross-cutting governance knowledge needs. I also appreciate that updates to the CKP are provided through discussions between ADB and stakeholders in Indonesia on their knowledge needs through annual country programming mission. Well, in the case of Indonesia, I can say that this year, at least, we have already conducted 2 major dialogues. First, the high-level policy dialogue, or the HLPD, that was conducted on last April. The event discussed key issues and themes for economic recovery, structural reforms, and long-term sustainable and resilient growth. Meanwhile, the second, following that HLPD, still in April, there was also a country knowledge consultation with government ministries in Indonesia as part of the country programming mission to help inform the understanding on demand from Indonesian governments for knowledge. The discussion were based around government knowledge demands within the pillars of the CPS, and this was an important initial step in understanding the impact we have on knowledge and potential gap or areas for strengthening in the coming years. Participants of the sessions, Indonesia has been experiencing notable knowledge support from the ADB. The Ministry of Finance and ADB, for instance, have maintained an active policy dialogue, even in the high level, for strengthening policies and programs, including through monitoring of Indonesia's economic recovery program. In particular, knowledge is shared through the forms of high-level event, daily interactions in technical assistance and loans, implementation, and through specific knowledge product and services. Just to give you a few recent examples of the knowledge collaborations between us and the ADB, that firstly, we have the COVID-19 response monitoring following the approval of the $1.5 billion budget support under the COVID-19 Active Expenditure Response, or the CARES program. We also have the Policy Action for COVID-19 Economic Recovery, or the PACER Dialogue Series. Well, in addition, on July this year, we also co-organized the International Conference on Climate Change that discussed the international good practices for low-carbon economies and pursuit of green, resilience, and inclusive COVID-19 recovery. Ladies and gentlemen, despite the notable knowledge support from Indonesia, from ADB to Indonesia, I trust that there are still room for improvements, however, and opportunities to have a closer and enhanced engagement. I think that the ADB can take this knowledge management and the CKP in particular to even a higher level by integrating and consolidating the operation knowledge among the multilateral development banks or DMDBs. Despite increased focus on knowledge management, much of the MDB's operation knowledge is still embedded and fragmented across institutions such as, let's say, World Bank, the Islamic Development Bank, or other banks such as Asian Infrastructure Investment Bank. And integrations and consolidations of knowledge support across MDB will not only avoid overlapping, but also systematically capture, share, and allow the operation knowledge to flow back for reuse to enhance the development and effectiveness in the member countries, and that including Indonesia. Now, on the last part, let me take you to the Indonesian's current role, that we are taking the role as the co-chair of the Coalitions of the Finance Minister for the Climate Actions. The coalition is a forum that brings together fiscal and economic policymakers in leading the global climate response and in securing a just and affordable transitions toward lower carbon resilient development. Now, Indonesia is also now taking part as Troika of the G20 before assuming as G20 Indonesia presidency in 2020 and 2022. Now, this is the area that ADB can also provide a knowledge and also several potential activity, including like sharing briefing, discussion papers, and knowledge products on relevant agendas, new knowledge products that are related to key areas of collaborations, like announcement of key initiatives such as new financing facilities that are relevant to G20 members, as well as we can do a possible collaborations and even in the lead up to the support of the G20. Not to mention also that Indonesia will take the Asian chairmanship in 2023. So to this end, Indonesia encouraged ADB to program finance and knowledge this upcoming global leading roles in the coming years. Now, to end this remarks, I hope that by the end of our session today, we will have a more distinct understanding on the growing knowledge needs of the member countries' governments, including Indonesia, and how I think ADB can take this further and take the role to strengthen its knowledge to support the member countries. Wish us all a fruitful discussion. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Chandra. Thank you so much. You raised some important points, and then we'll have our panelists discuss that as well, especially the new knowledge consultations that we've tried out with the government. You were part of one of them, and so was Ms. Diane, as well as the role of MDBs, the other MDBs, how ADB can actually be in the frontier of making sure that, we are the ones leading the knowledge work and are able to work with our partners closely to make sure we focus on our comparative advantage and let others focus on theirs. And lastly, I like this idea about growing knowledge needs from the government, right? And how do we respond to that? And how do we make sure we're picking the right thing and focusing on what we need to do? So I like some of the comments here where they were saying that let's hear from our colleagues, right? But before, we've actually prepared a short video that summarizes what we are calling the dynamic country knowledge programming effort here in ADB. So rather than me giving you a presentation, we thought let's have an animation video for 4 minutes to explain to you what it is. And then we dive straight into our panel discussion with just some brief comments from our colleagues in SPD.
Knowledge support. It is a key component of ADB's Strategy 2030 for strengthening our country-focused approach and becoming an active knowledge partner for developing member countries. ADB provides between 40 to 120 knowledge products for each of our clients at any given time. Vietnam and Philippines resident missions, for example, manages approximately 45 and 57 technical assistances, worth $68 million and $108 million respectively, just in 2021. Demand for knowledge support is expected to continue growing as DMC's development becomes progressively more sophisticated and are also keen to build deeper institutional capacity. This requires planning for longer-term and strategic engagements. ADB must fully link its knowledge products and services to the current and future lending portfolio, identify effective distribution of resources, and, most importantly, ensure that response to a country's knowledge needs is programmatic and not ad hoc. To achieve this, we need to shift away from the traditional approach of disconnected country knowledge plan and country partnership strategy and towards a more fully integrated process. This is the core principle of the dynamic CKP. It is part of the new CPS reforms released by Strategy, Policy, and Partnerships Department in 2021, now scaled up to support adoption by all ADB resident missions. The new Indicative Country Pipeline and Monitoring Report from August 2021 also links to the dynamic CKP approach, making it easier for country teams to monitor knowledge activities and think strategically about its knowledge solutions. This is achieved through a data-driven, easy-to-follow, four-step process. It starts with assessing government demands and analyzing a country's existing knowledge portfolio, categorizing knowledge products based on knowledge outcomes, prioritizing knowledge based on select criteria, and finalizing the CKP in consultation with the DMCs. The process is meant to help teams focus on the outcomes and the impact of knowledge solutions, instead of only counting the products and services. Through this process, it is hoped that resident missions will gain better insights into their existing knowledge portfolio, anticipate future demands from DMCs, and monitor the delivery of ADB knowledge solutions. For example, India, Bangladesh, and Sri Lanka have found that the number of TAs managed has been increasing, while the average value of TAs has been falling. Another insight revealed that the number of regional technical assistants is higher than the number of country-specific TAs in these countries. These insights are helpful in stimulating discussions about the right mix of knowledge support within the country and potentially at the regional level. The dynamic CKP process has been piloted in more than 10 countries and has demonstrated its value in designing a CKP that meets government demand and can achieve significant knowledge outcomes. The dynamic CKP is key to ADB's journey in becoming the premier knowledge solutions provider in the region. In the words of Vietnam Resident Missions Country Director, "Knowledge is so critical in Vietnam, and we need to be more strategic." This exercise helps us do that. Every year, the Indicative Country Pipeline and Monitoring Report will be automatically linked to the CKP knowledge outcomes. Therefore, teams only need to report on the broad knowledge outputs they intend to produce to meet the outcomes, not a broad list of every knowledge product and service. This leaves room for teams to be agile and demand responsive. You can find further details on the process from documentation such as the CKP process manual and sample CKPs from selected countries, a self-serve CKP portal containing detailed guidance, templates, and tools, and interactive sources such as videos, roadshows, and training sessions. The dynamic CKP approach helps ADB in implementing its Knowledge Management Action Plan. ADB will continue to support its DMCs to embark on bold and transformative knowledge initiatives.
Thank you very much. I hope, yes, there was a little bit of jargon there because this is actually meant as an internal video, but we wanted to share with you to at least you understand the core principle, right? That we are trying to move away from just counting simple products, but to a more programmatic, strategic, higher level approach to our knowledge work. Andrew, who is here from the Vietnam country office, he'll be speaking. He doesn't know we quoted him in the video. I hope you don't mind, Andrew. But I'll ask you to come onto the stage in a minute and to share some more of your experience. But what I'll do is, David from our Strategy Policy Department, could you please come on stage? David is our close ally in this work, and a lot of this could not have happened without him being here. David, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Vivek. Let me share my screen here first, please. I just wanted to say thanks to all the participants who are joining us, especially the people from outside ADB. It's very great to have you here. And I was expecting this to be an ADB-only session, but it's even better to have people from outside that can share some insights as well. But let me just talk a little bit of background for you, for the people that are from outside ADB. This Country Knowledge Plan is an appendix to our country partnership strategy. Just to make that clear in the video, hopefully that came through, but just in case, it's an appendix to the country partnership strategy. And also we have a new country knowledge plan update table in a new document called the Indicative Country Pipeline and Monitoring Report. Let me just say that this work, as Vivek mentioned, has been going on for 2 years. It's been a very fruitful partnership between my department, the Strategy and Policy Department, and his Knowledge Advisory Service Center in STCC. And we've been working hard to try and correct some of the issues that we had with the country knowledge plan in the past. We both recognized that there were a lot of issues with our country knowledge plan in the past, which we've been doing for several years now. And we realized that we need to find a better way of delivering solutions, knowledge solutions to our countries. So let me give you a little bit of context in terms of how we came about reforming the country knowledge plan. What we saw is that the content tended to be static. In other words, we prepared the country knowledge plan at the same time as the country partnership strategy, and that was it. It was done. We never changed it. We had no means to update it. Secondly, we were failing to capture all the knowledge portfolio in a particular country. There's a lot of knowledge needs, but we were looking mainly internally at what we could deliver to our clients instead of looking at what they really needed. Thirdly, we were lacking a good structure and alignment with the country partnership strategy. A lot of times the CKP was simply an afterthought at the very end of the country partnership strategy preparation, and it was not really linked into or integrated with the rest of the objectives of the CPS. And lastly, we had limited follow-up. Once this was in place for the next 5 years, we never really referred back to it. We never followed up with the country's stakeholders, and it was just one of the things that once it was done, it was never looked at again. So what we've been doing and implemented starting about a year and a half ago is a new approach, this dynamic country knowledge plan. And again, I got to credit Vivek's team. This is not SPD's work. This is Vivek's team really taking a lead on this. But what we've done is we decided to make some key changes. First was to identify what are the operational knowledge needs. We tended to just look before at kind of knowledge products that were kind of on the side to what we were doing elsewhere in the country. What we really need to do, and I think this is brought up in one of the chat responses, is that what are the operational needs that we can integrate with our knowledge? How can we bring knowledge to what we do in our lending and our technical assistance and not just focus on knowledge as an afterthought? Second big change was having greater and more frequent consultations with our DMC stakeholders, not just the government, as someone rightly pointed out on the chat box, but with the private sector, with NGOs and other civil society organizations to find out what their needs are, not just what ADB wants to give them. Third key change in this approach was to develop a map of what we can deliver to respond to the client demands. We can't do everything as ADB. We don't have the expertise in every area. So we're looking at what can we deliver that responds to the client demands. Fourth change was on developing knowledge outcomes that are more aligned with the CPS and integrating the knowledge with the rest of our operations, not just having it as a side to the rest of the CPS. And lastly, we want to strengthen collaboration with partners both within the country, externally, and have more fruitful partnerships on delivering knowledge, that especially with areas that we can't deliver ourselves. And all this was meant to align with the Strategy 2030 objectives of knowledge that you see in the bottom of the screen. Now, the key innovation that we're really proud of is in this new indicative country pipeline monitoring report, where we have the ability now to update our knowledge plan on an annual basis, because this ICPM is delivered annually. And in the past, we just had the CKP as part of the CPS, and that would stay the same for 5 years. Now we've got a way of being fresh, responding to new demands, and keeping our knowledge relevant to the country. And what we see here is more alignment with the CPS. For example, this case of Georgia, there were 3 CPS objectives. What we've got now is the knowledge outcome aligned to that objective. And then in the box, the rows below, you'll see that we have various knowledge products and services that align to that knowledge outcome to deliver more of a holistic response to the CPS objective. I don't want to spend too much time on this, so let me just finalize my presentation by looking at what I think are the success factors of having a dynamic CKP. First, we need to integrate knowledge into our operations. It's not just lending anymore. ADB is aware of that. We're trying to deliver much more than we have in the past on a more holistic approach to having a more robust toolbox that includes knowledge. Secondly, we need to engage our stakeholders from private sector, from government, from civil society more frequently on their knowledge needs, not just a one-off consultation, but regularly engaging through our resident missions. Thirdly, we need to bring across other parts of ADB, not just the regional departments, to deliver solutions to our clients. So it's going to take the non-regional departments, the non-operational departments to deliver solutions as well. Fourth, close collaboration with our colleagues in the Knowledge Advisory Service Center, led by Vivek and his team. They're willing to help the resident missions deliver on their knowledge needs. And lastly, we need the country directors to buy into this new approach. The country directors are really leading our knowledge in the country. They need to lead the change in mindset and how we deliver knowledge to our countries. So thank you very much, and I will turn this over to Vivek and our country directors to talk about what they've done.
Yeah, thank you, David. David, I'll request you to stay on stage, but you touched upon a very nice summary of what was happening before and what we've kind of changed now. Because I see our audience is actually split. It's 50% internal, 50% external. So it's good that you are able to kind of balance that out. Let me now invite with great pleasure, because we actually had 12 country directors to choose from, but we chose the best of the best. Andrew, could I request you to come on stage? Andrew Jeffries is the country director for the Vietnam office. And Andrew is engaged with this process. Pavit Ramachandran is the country director for Mongolia. Pavit, if you could just come up on stage. And then Jazira Asanova will actually give you a different perspective. She's a principal operations specialist in the South Asia regional department here in headquarters, and she'll have a little different perspective on how she engaged with this process for her countries in South Asia. Jazira, could you please come up on stage? And David, you're more than welcome to come up on stage as well, so that if there are any questions, we can lob it to you. Pavit, I thought we'll start with you. Tell us a little bit about the Mongolian landscape for knowledge, right? What is it that you do, and what was the challenges that you faced in doing this country knowledge programming work?
Thanks, Vivek. And first of all, pleasure to be here, and great to see this many people in the session. And really, I think the other sessions have been just as exciting and vibrant. I was there for the opening session, and many congratulations to you and the team for pulling this together. I think before I jump in, Vivek, I think it's useful to perhaps provide a bit of context in Mongolia. So, if you look at where we were coming from in terms of taking on this CKP as it was, Mongolia we were coming off what was our deepest, more substantial country partnership strategy from 2017 to 2020. Both in terms of lending, but also in terms of the breadth and scope of our engagement. We also, this year marks 30 years of ADB's engagement in Mongolia, operational engagement. So, it gave us an opportunity to look back in terms of how we had tackled and supported, critical development issues, looked at structural constraints, and what meaningful, tangible impacts we had brought on the ground. So we had this sort of perspective to draw on. But beyond that, I think, what could we then do different and to be more strategic, impactful, policy relevant in this upcoming context? So it wasn't just about, small tweaks. We wanted to take a more strategic view, look at quality over quantity. And this was an approach we took across the CPS. So our CPS was approved on the 6th of September, so it's very, very recent. We've looked at reducing the number of operations, so there's been a reduction from about 95 to 73 operations across the board. And this was a very deliberate effort to make sure that we could bring more attention, more resources to bear on all of these operations, and also reduce the transaction costs with our client. So let me make five points, Vivek, to your question on the CKP itself. First, I think, like with everything, timing, it's all about timing, right? So looking at engaging the client and key stakeholders from the very start. So, during preparation itself. So we engaged with Ministry of Finance in particular to agree on the core principles. So, that we were going to be more strategic, that we were going to look at quality over quantity, that we were going to draw on lessons from our previous engagement, and have a strong monitoring and evaluation aspect built into all of this. So the iterative nature of all our knowledge work. And we saw knowledge as fundamentally driving programming. So, there wasn't this artificial divide between our technical assistance work and our lending work. So really, this was very much an integrated effort, and our knowledge work was used to drive discussions and consultations from the very start. And then we had this long view of everything we were doing. We were looking at learning from our development experience, our portfolio of lending and non-lending work over the course of the last 30 years. We also tried to bring all of this together in a critical juncture. So we looked at doing work with ERCD, for example, around a country diagnostic study. We had our CPS final review completed just a few months before that, and we had 19 sector assessments completed. So all of this was brought together very deliberately so that we had a very deep pool of analytical, diagnostic, and knowledge work to draw on for our country partnership strategy. So this was work which was done in collaboration with ERCD, PSOD, our private sector folks, SPD, where David sits, and of course STCC, working very closely with the knowledge team and other colleagues in STCC. So the first point was around timing. Second issue really is, and I think this probably doesn't get emphasized enough, is that everybody is a knowledge specialist really in the bank. And we looked at it that way in terms of our pool of national staff who have rich, deep experience working in the field, driving policy dialogue, and of course implementing projects, but also looking at ADB's own internal expertise. I mentioned the departments that I did, but just to highlight a few areas, we worked with our Office of Public-Private Partnership, and I saw in the chat box there were some questions of how we engage with the private sector, to look at the public-private partnership landscape in Mongolia. So we did a PPP monitor to then, crystallize specific interventions, and there, building on what was very strong political momentum on the government side. With PSOD, we worked jointly on investment climate reforms, focusing particularly on the renewable sector, but also more upstream work. With ERCD, we took a deeper dive, beyond just the country diagnostic study, but to look at the impact of FDI in terms of Mongolia's value chains and diversification narrative. So that was a very important area. And right through all this, I think the perspective that this dynamic CKP process and the analysis that you and your colleagues in STCC did was very useful. Gave us a very different perspective on gaps, needs, and really looking at client demand in that context. The third point I'd make is on implementation. So moving, beyond just talking the talk to walking the walk, right? So our exam question, which we often pose here, is, Monday morning, what has changed in terms of the way things operate, whether it's, whoever our stakeholder is. So focusing on very sharp policy notes, translating this in terms of the key stakeholders. So I'll, mention our air quality work, for example, where, the Speaker of the House used our policy note to present to Parliament. And this then triggered and catalyzed downstream raw coal ban on the use of raw coal in Mongolia, which was a major contributor to the pollution impacts. And then we worked with OAI and EARD on getting Mongolia off the grey list in terms of the anti-money laundering issue, which was, and again, this was not work that translated into a knowledge product per se, but we had mock exams done with our counterparts and so on. The fourth point, and I'll wrap up quickly, Vivek, is on flexibility. And this is the dynamic aspect of the CKP process. And here I think I want to really emphasize the intersection between knowledge and lending. We wouldn't have been able to respond as comprehensively and as flexibly to the COVID recovery and response needs if we didn't have the body of experience across our health projects over many years. So, really drawing on that and making sure that knowledge was at the foundation of all of this work. And last point is really partnerships. Being humble about what we don't know, right? Not all of the answers lie with the ADB. I mean, we are the largest developing partner in Mongolia, but, leveraging and accessing civil society on key issues, working with organizations like the Asia Foundation on political economy reforms, issues like women's entrepreneurship, but also developing a coalition on critical reform issues like investment climate air effort, working with the IFIs, but now looking ahead on, the quintessential cross-sectoral issue, climate change. Again, working with, coalition of partners on that. So I'll stop there and happy to take questions later.
Yeah, we have a second round of questions as well. But now let me move to Andrew. Andrew, Vietnam's context is very, very different from Mongolia's. And even for our audience here, they should know that there is still a lot of work to be done in this country knowledge programming work. This is just our progress update. We wanted to share with you, and there's a lot of room for improvement. But it's nice to kind of hear the kind of approaches we all took. And it was not a cookie cutter approach to planning our knowledge supply. So Andrew, can you tell us a little bit about Vietnam?
Sure. What we did, and I'll start by letting everyone know we couldn't have done it without your help, Vivek, and David and your whole team, is to conduct a detailed supply and demand assessment and mapping of all our knowledge support across the country. So on the demand side, that meant capturing client knowledge needs from all the government ministries and departments we work with, provincial as well as central government level. So this involves surveys and many discussions and meetings, a lot of time basically. Now on the supply side, you'd think this would be the easier part because this is internal, but it proved quite complex and time consuming. It's I guess straightforward to review the Vietnam specific technical assistance, or for the people outside of ADB, what we call TAs in internal development institution speak, and the knowledge work they supply. But we had to review 36 regional TAs, where Vietnam is one of many of our developing member countries included. And so we had to determine what knowledge was being supplied specifically for Vietnam. So again, I guess quickly for those outside of ADB, we have specific technical assistance in a particular country, targeting a very specific need or a sector or what have you. But we have many that cover a theme or an issue across a number of countries, from few to many. So these we call regional technical assistance. So regarding, it was not easy to, and sometimes these regional technical assistants do not capture specific information for each country, and it's a little more broad and general. So we had to track down individuals around the bank to determine what was being done in Vietnam, what wasn't within their respective regional technical assistance. And again, the Knowledge Advisory Service Center team was critical in helping us do this. Regarding the funding amounts, we wanted to get a sense of the total resources being put to use in Vietnam. I think the earlier presentation talked about 45 TAs and over $68 million. We had to make some simplifying assumptions, such as if a RETA covered 10 countries, in some cases we had to just make the assumption that 1/10 of the TA amount went to Vietnam. There is no way in the system yet to actually track that specific Vietnam amount, or it was very not easy to get our hands on quickly. And this had to be done in a timely manner to support our whole country partnership strategy process. So once we had all of this, we classified the demand and the needs from our clients, as well as the supply from ADB, into the sectors and themes, and we were able to map out what was being supplied versus what was being demanded, and how well we were delivering on the government's asks. And if there's anything we were delivering that's, say, less important or a lower priority for our client. So it also enabled us to see how well all this knowledge is or is not aligned with our strategy pillars and priorities for the country. So there was a color map of the results, with green areas for where the supply and the demand matched well, yellow where it did partially, and red where it did not. And this was a huge eye-opener. It enabled us to, for the first time, to see this overall picture in a clearer way. And at first, we were alarmed to see some red zones in our map. But as we thought about it, and the fact that we just don't have the resources to deliver everything, it's okay and in fact inevitable that they're red zones. So the important thing is that the green areas are covering our priorities and the government's priorities, and that our finite resources are allocated well. So that's really just quickly what we did. Why it's important, things are changing very fast in Vietnam, well, everywhere, I guess, but what the government wants from ADB is changing. Sovereign operations had slowly gone down several years ago. It's just starting to pick up again a little bit, but our non-sovereign operations are very strong. And the knowledge support the government wants and needs is more sophisticated than in the past. And so our traditional kind of country engagement via large sovereign lending windows, that's not the case anymore. And I think that is happening or will happen in other countries as well. And delivering efficiently and strategically on knowledge needs is really critical for us to stay relevant to our countries. So I must say that our regional TAs have been somewhat of a challenge in that we'll get a request from headquarters to ask the government for a no objection to do certain knowledge work in Vietnam, and that may come right after we've had a discussion with the government that they want us to not prioritize other areas, or maybe another development partner is covering that area. And so if we just unsend this request, it makes us appear out of touch. So it's important that we coordinate well. I don't want to give the impression that REDAs are a problem, because they play a very, very key role in our overall knowledge delivery. It's just we have the way we analyze it and track it and communicate about it is just very important and really not an option anymore. So
thanks, Andrew.
So that's about it for Vietnam. I think this may pertain to others, if not all our DMCs, but I'll stop there. Thanks.
I think what you conveyed well is, Andrew, like in a bureaucracy such as ours, if I can call it, it's not easy to just make a change overnight. It takes pioneers such as all of you in this call to kind of say, let's engage and see where this goes. Because there was you made the analysis sound so scientific, Andrew, but we literally made it as we went along.
Yeah.
Right? And we thought this one doesn't work. How do we do the portfolio analysis for knowledge management? And I think for our audience here, I think it'll be useful to see that this can be done. This kind of analysis does give a different perspective, and your traffic light approach is being adopted by other, country directors and resident missions in ADB. So, that was also a unique innovation that we were able to come up with on the fly. But the idea here is that all of this went into something useful for all of you to be able to plan that. The issue of retas, etc., that's another learning for us. We don't want to be 100% demand responsive either, because we also are responsible for pushing new knowledge out there. So how do we make sure that balance is tilted, in a right proportion for which is convenient for all of you and is actually intentional and not ad hoc, right? That has been our big message from the beginning. Now let's move on to Jazeera. Jazeera, a few quick minutes from you, because we've got only 16 minutes to go. You were a pioneer. You introduced us to India, Bangladesh, and Sri Lanka. And you've got a new idea about a regional approach for knowledge management. Let's have our audience hear a little bit about that.
Thank you, Vivek. So earlier this year, we engaged with Vivek and his team with 3 resident missions and TA mapping analysis in resident missions that were processing or are processing country partnership strategies. And as we engaged in this process, we saw some common themes emerge. For instance, we gained a better understanding of what was the structure of our TA portfolio and the types of TAs that we were having, as well as the trends in the number and value of TAs, There were some themes around CPS prioritization and sectoral focus, and what kind of knowledge tracks our TAs fell under. And so these kind of ideas gave us some thought on whether there was some scope to improve allocations to some underrepresented areas, rebalance our portfolio, and basically explore if we can have a more strategic approach. And also thanks to Vivek's team, our country teams are exploring, a more structured approach to identifying client need when it comes to knowledge. And we are still learning about futures thinking as well as horizon scanning. So this exercise gave us kind of a slightly kind of regional insight. And we are now in a discovery stage. We are connecting the dots as we combine operational insights that are coming out of resident missions with a more strategic approach. And in the medium term, we hope that the country partnership, country programming, knowledge programming process will help us course correct and plan our knowledge support more effectively. So we are exploring kind of a feasibility of a more strategic approach. But of course, these are early days for our department. We're just starting these conversations. So how do we want to go about it? SART has a structure of networks, and I call these networks peer-led performance teams that come together around certain topics, and we have a network for knowledge management. So we're translating SART's experience with networks into knowledge management. We've got about 30 plus knowledge focals who are part of this process. And in addition, our DG and DDG have proposed that we set up country knowledge teams, which is a very new thing for us. And so this year we are piloting country knowledge teams with 1 or 2 resident missions. And then hope to continue next year. So what we hope to do is we hope to use that as a platform for discussing these regional insights, also to have it as a venue for sharing good practices. And I'm confident that all our resident missions have some good practices to share, also lessons learned to share, and build a stronger sense of community. And this theme of team building and community building is coming out very strongly from this knowledge forum. So that's something that we also want to look at. And of course, it's worth mentioning that although we see some common themes, we still see merit in having a differentiated approach because our DMCs are different. And so we should be planning our support accordingly. And just to summarize, this entire process can lead to greater ownership at the RM level, better connections between and linkages between headquarters and resident missions, and this greater intentionality that could lead to organizational learning. And turning it over back to you, Vivek.
Thank you, Jazeera. I think that's, for everyone in the audience to also know that, so we are now piloting this in a regional way, right, in South Asia, and Jazeera has been the champion for us there and we are devising a new methodology to see, can knowledge be planned better at a regional level? And there's already demand, Jazeera, from Southeast Asia to also want to replicate this. But we said it's too soon. We don't know what we are still going to figure out. So it'll be good to watch that space. I was just thinking now, we don't have too much time, but let's take some questions from the audience. Andrew, let me ask you first. Engaging the private sector, right? How do we make sure that that is done well? And also, if you could just briefly touch upon, someone talked about a poll. Remember the survey that we did with the Vietnam government for understanding their knowledge demand? We did that in Mongolia as well. Andrew, why don't you talk about these 2 points, and then I'll quickly hand it to Pavit as well.
Sure. Really, regarding the supporting the private sector, that's Vietnam has they just became a lower middle income country. Their aspiration is to become an upper middle income country by the end of the decade, and then keep moving beyond that. To get there will be the private sector growth is what will get them there. As I mentioned earlier, our non-sovereign operations are growing very fast here. And to tie it into knowledge, we have a dedicated team here in the resident mission that's Vietnam resident mission and CERD, Southeast Asia Regional Department staff, as well as some private sector operations department staff. I'm trying not to use our acronyms because there's a lot of we're trying to come up with ways to apply knowledge and technical assistance to further the development impacts of our private sector operations. And then, and of course, the enabling environment for that is quite important, and a source of some of our, where some of our resources are being channeled now. And as for the surveys we did, amongst the government to draw out what kind of knowledge is wanted here, there's a lot. What came out was some of this, how these are broad, very important, wide-reaching questions, how to move from lower and middle income to upper middle income status, and what are the skills and knowledge that the workforce and others need to get there. And these, this is more complicated and sophisticated support that they're asking for compared to, building roads and the like, of several decades ago. So I'll stop there, but
Thanks, Andrew.
Yeah.
Amit, a very quick response on maybe engaging with other MDBs, other IFIs in this.
Yeah, thanks, Vivek. And I think it ties in with what we were just discussing as well. I mean, if you look at the economic recovery, for example, and some of the issues in Mongolia, I think translate across the region. This is not going to happen without fundamentally still addressing structural issues. Mm-hmm. Whether it's around diversification here in Mongolia, moving beyond mining, creating jobs in a way that involves the private sector. And of course, I mentioned climate change earlier, right? Making sure the recovery is green, climate resilient, and inclusive. Now, these are issues that ADB cannot tackle by themselves, and that this really emphasizes and puts the spotlight on the need to leverage partnerships, work with key stakeholders across the board, whether it's civil society, private sector, of course, and I saw Michael's point in the comment. How can private sector be a knowledge provider? I mentioned earlier about the PPP landscape, and that's one area where we've been looking at all aspects, whether it's the regulatory, institutional, or technical aspects of PPP, drawing on our extensive work that we've done previously in Mongolia through our Office of Public-Private Partnership and PSOD. So it's got to be a coordinated coalition of partners pushing these reforms, whether it's on investment climate change, and issues such as that. So,
Good point, Pavid. Thank you. David, let me ask you a question. ADB is sometimes, been referred to as an oil tanker. So it takes a while for it to change, right? And this theme in the last 2 days has been a lot about behavior change nudge. SPD's role in that, how do we get people to, like, for example, Andrew's issue of RETAs and changing people's mindset and making them do things differently. How can we change that, David? What do we need to do more there?
Thanks, Vivek. Very good question. You're very right. It's difficult to steer the ship, and to make changes. But, it really, I think looking back at this experience, it took a few key people to recognize the need for change and discuss that with other departments within ADB and kind of bring together the leveraging of at least two departments, then the regional departments as well later on, to recognize the need to change how we're doing things. And again, I give a lot of credit to you and your team in this initiative and changing things. And now we've got the CDs, country directors buying in. Some of them were skeptical at first, but once they start seeing the results
of the ones on this meeting, huh?
Not these ones, no. But thankfully, a lot of them saw the benefits after a couple of pilot initiatives in some countries. And as you've told many people, many more country directors have come to you and say, "Hey, we want this." And it really took a few people to recognize the need for change and then show the benefits of doing something differently, and others kind of came on board, and that's why we're at this stage now. Thank you.
Thanks. Jazira, I'm going to give you a 1-minute question. What could we have done better? Any reflections from you? There's a lot of learnings for us here as well.
No, I think that the entire process, we approach knowledge management as an incremental process that needs to unravel slowly, where we go for quick wins, and we actually take into account that a lot of these values are new, and we need to translate these specific values into actions, set up communities, and foster a culture of collaboration, and use these knowledge teams as silo busters. So as as we reflect on this, I think that the pace of this is going well. We are still kind of at the beginning of it. We look forward to a journey, and what we need to have is a tolerance for ambiguity, because we do not have perfect information at this stage, and so we need to engage with teams very closely so that we build trust first, and take this forward.
Building trust and tolerance for ambiguity. I think there's never a better opportunity than to thank my panelists and request Manmohan Prakash, the Deputy Director General for South Asia, to talk a little bit about the tolerance for ambiguity at the management level, and how how they see this process evolving. Manmohan, if you could just come up on stage. Hi, can you hear us?
Yes, very. Good morning and good afternoon.
The floor is yours. I'll request the panelists to step off with a big thanks to them. Manmohan, we are running 1 minute behind schedule, so you have the floor for the next 4 minutes.
No, I'm good. Maybe I'll just take a couple of minutes, but I actually listened to the lovely discussion that was taking place, and also some of the questions that you have actually given to the panelists. I think knowledge for us at ADB from the management perspective is a shift from, it used to be finance plus, where the finance used to drive knowledge and the co-financing, that's what we used to say. But given the changing circumstances, it is knowledge plus. I think if it is an existential threat for ADB, if we don't really put knowledge at the center of our operations, we will probably be priced out of the market. With several of the comparator institutions coming and offering competitive solutions, I think if we need to stay relevant, if we need to stay competitive, I think knowledge has to be at the center of our operations. I think that is one point that I would like to make. The second thing also is time is running out. The way technology is changing, the way knowledge paradigm is shifting. Unless and until we bring in good people, we bring in the people who really know what is likely to come up in the next 5 or 10 years, we will simply not be able to stay very relevant. So, and the example is, it took 200 years for Germany for the development that it did, but it took Japan about 50 years, Korea 30 years, and countries like Bangladesh would like to do that in 20 years. Now, how do you do it? You really do it with the changes that are happening. You have to do it learning from the other countries how they did it, and also you have to really have knowledge as one of the drivers of making that change, because if you do things right, they are less expensive, they have a huge development impact, and they can also give results to the people in a much quicker and a much faster manner. So I think in that whole context, if I put ADB as an institution, I think we all have to really take this up very seriously. And I think CPS, or the country operations, is the right place to start, but also the organization needs to change. I heard what Jazeera was mentioning, but I think the issue here is that each and every one of ADB staff has a huge depth of knowledge. How can we distill it? How can we bring it out? How can we give him or her the platform to share what he or she says? And many times when we actually try and do some new things, we fail. But that failure is again the road to success. So at an organizational level, for us to accept failures, to allow people to use knowledge as one of the key inputs to building a better ADB for tomorrow, is something we need to do. And on knowledge, another thing is that it needs to be demand driven. It needs to really come from the client's needs. Today, our clients are not the same what they were maybe 10, 15, 20 years ago. Today, the clients have probably better minds than many of our people at the bank. I mean, I'm seeing it in South Asia. These are top-notch people from best universities and very dedicated, very driven to really change their country. Now, our job is of a facilitator. So if we can bring some of the best minds, some of the best thinkers, and also some of the best solutions it's actually a good opportunity for us to help in their partnerships. And if you look at the total development budget, or if you look at the total development thing of a country, ADB is a very, very small, tiny bit of it. How does ADB play that role that you still get noticed, and how do you really still get counted, is something of a challenge, I think, which each and every staff, each and every management person needs to think carefully and think what is in it for us. How can we make ADB part of this lovely story, a part of this great story that the country is going? And if we do that, I think then we probably will be playing a very useful role, a role that they will recognize. And moving forward, I also feel we need to bring the youth, the young, the gender balance, everything, because there is so much of possibility that you can actually look at. So broad set of knowledge, broad set of skills that we are needed. Work habits have to change, and trades. I mean, even organizing this event that you've done today is so refreshing, it's so different. And I'm happy that I could find time to join it. Friday is a holiday in Dhaka, so I had a free morning. But I think we need to do more of these. We really need to build on our strengths, and we need to learn. And I think somebody said we should also be willing to learn from our failures. All in all, I think knowledge is what will drive ADB for the next 15, 20 years. And more importantly, it also helped the countries achieve their development aspirations. So with that, those few words, let me thank David, Pavit, Andrew, Jazeera for good insights and how they have been working, but to you for organizing it. And I wish you well, and I hope all the people who are listening to this really have a good understanding of how ADB is changing and how ADB is going to play a more important role on the knowledge side in the coming few months and years. So thank you, Vivek.
Thank you so much, Manmohan. That was a perfect summary. In case any of you in the audience are interested in learning more about this process, please reach out to me. My LinkedIn profile is there in the section. So please do drop us a note. If you want, you can also reach out at knowledge@adb.org. We'll be happy to take some of those comments there, and you can reach out to me directly. We have a poll as well. So please give us your feedback on what you thought about this session. And with that, I would like to thank my speakers for taking out this time and also putting up with us for all the tech rehearsals that we had to do. You guys have been great to work with, and we will continue to work and share more stories like this from ADB, especially on our country knowledge programming. So have a good rest of the day, and please do take some time to join some of our sessions post lunch. Thank you very much.